It's time for European governments to reinvent their playbook. Power will shift to the nations that can best attract, utilize, and tax the profits of artificial intelligence. Now, this quote was from an article written by our next speaker 5 years ago. And we're about to learn what has happened in between and that it's even more relevant today. Next, we'll discover different dimensions of AI. We've referred to AI several times today already, but now different dimensions of AI and how AI and sustainability change the geopolitical landscape. Our final keynote speaker has just recently co-authored a book titled Climate and the New World Order, so she has very much her finger on the pulse of these megatrends. She is an investor, tech diplomat, board professional, economist, in short, a true Renaissance woman, and now she joins us online from Stockholm. So please welcome Ms. Aurora Belfrage.
Thank you, and thank you for having me. I'm so sorry to not be there. That was the plan, but this season of February and sneezing and colds has moved into March. It's snowing, and my daughter is sick, and she takes priority. But luckily, technology, which is a poignant term, allows me to address you guys today. Anyway, I am between you and cocktails, and luckily, I have a great topic. I'm going to talk about some fascinating things. So hopefully this will be a good end before cocktails, because I want to talk about just that. AI and sustainability changes everything. And I'll start with a bit of let me see here. Make sure I can change the slide. So my plan for today is to give us a quick recap of artificial intelligence on some sort of timeline. I want to talk about how artificial intelligence shifts geopolitics. I want to talk about it on the geeky battlefield as well when we add tech to that. It would be irresponsible of me not to talk about quantum computing when we talk about the geopolitical landscape. And then finally address sustainability and geopolitics, because it all goes hand in hand. So, recap, AI. Today, we have what we call narrow AI. Basically, everything that you see today, including ChatGPT. It's recommendations, it's target advertising, it's autonomous driving, it's facial recognition, becoming more and more sophisticated, but everything can do basically one thing at a time. When we talk about general intelligence, AGI, it has the ability to transfer learnings from one domain to another, kind of like how the brain works. Next phase will be super intelligence, and that will radically outperform human capabilities. Our small, tiny brains are acutely imperfect, but in the next phase, we will know it. And then comes the term that you've probably heard a lot, singularity, the explosion of intelligence where AI can improve itself. And if you want, technology grows uncontrollably. And then transhumanism. We become computers ourselves, integrated, the wetware with the software with the hardware. And you could argue the fact that I'm holding a phone constantly is actually close to me being a robot, even though it's not meshed into my body yet. But on some sort of spiritual level, it is. There's 4 things I want you to know when it comes to artificial intelligence if this isn't your domain. AI is an umbrella term that you can use for a lot of different types of technologies, and the industry loves to geek around and be specific about the different terms. I would ignore that. I would understand it's text and speech, image, videos, pattern recognitions, and predicting the future. And for those of you that are non-techies in the audience and want to know more, my team at sustainable.com has created a comprehensive report on what AI is for non-techie, both in Swedish and in English, free to download. Basically, we're talking about artificial intelligence today, but again, that is just one of the forefront pioneering technologies that are changing the game. It's robotics, it's quantum, it's data, it's automation in some sort of traditional sense, but on steroids. It's 3D printing, it's VR, AR, virtual reality and augmented reality. It's also biotech and nanotech, blockchain, and the whole energy play that is shifting the geopolitical game. I'd like to make my main point, and my main point today is what affects geopolitical power in this so-called world order. One answer, as we've heard several times today, it's military strength, number of troops, degree of sophistication of the weapons arsenal, and, as we've seen in recent times, the collective will to fight for one's country. Another complementary answer that is gaining increasing attention is technology, automation, and processing power. Partly technology is leveraging the military, and we heard that earlier today as well. New types of weapons have always shifted geopolitical power. Eric Schmidt, the previous chairman of Google, wrote recently that the difference now is the previous shifts in technology made step changes. This makes incremental changes, makes it harder to analyze and follow. But above all, and this is my point, the technological shifts that we're seeing in all the texts that I just mentioned is changing the economic leveraging, the strengthening of industry, increasing competitiveness, talent attraction, capital inflow, and tax revenue. Things that we don't traditionally see as military and defense or geopolitical, more civilian, but that is altering the geopolitical game. The map has been rewritten with AI, technologies like blockchain, 5G, 6G. Because what in a traditional analysis was considered civilian now has geostrategic and military relevance in a digitalized world. And I'm going to show examples of that today, which means that forward-leaning companies and nations can take advantage of knowledge and the insights in population behavior, preferences, and concerns can influence anything from currency fluctuations to degrees of polarization to definitions of the truth. So access to data in this digitalized world becomes the weapons arsenal. And you could argue that Meta, formerly Facebook, Alphabet, formerly Google, Amazon, Apple, Tencent, Alibaba, are undoubtedly the new giants in this so-called new world order. But let me underbuild this with some examples. Basically, you have this bland statement, but is nevertheless true. Whoever controls the data controls the world. And anyone in Silicon Valley or the tech communities around the world could have said something similar. And my point being, that has nothing to do with defense, weaponry, cybersonics, or anything of that degree of sophistication. It's about Pinterest, Facebook, searches, Tinder, Skypes, tweets, etc. And it's sometimes hard to fathom that what you like, or the kitten pictures that you look at on Facebook, has geopolitical implications. But anyone that's seen Cambridge Analytica, read about that, knows it's true. And we can see this in the market cap that has shifted over the last 20 years. The previous dominant companies in terms of market share were companies like General Electric, Exxon, Citi, Walmart, etc. And now it's the companies that I've mentioned that are data heavy and rich and underpin everything that we do. If we cluster that geographically, we can see that the US and Asia, effectively China, is dominating these markets. And I recommend an author, Kai-Fu Lee, that's talking about economic colonialism, which means that the US and China, being the major host nations for these countries, benefiting from the tax revenues of these companies in a world where winner takes all, and this centrifugal power of artificial intelligence will potentially, in some kind of worst case scenario, and we need to think in those terms in order to be prepared, will sit on the financial power of a digitalized world, and therefore be able to dominate the chess game and support countries, smaller countries, that don't have the same benefit and therefore won't benefit from those types of tax returns. So point being, in a geostrategic relevance in a digitalized world is data. The AI has shifted the geopolitical game, and as we heard earlier, has nothing to do with boots on the ground, no bloodshed. And this is where I think the Western world needs to wake up and smell the coffee. Our brothers and sisters in China have very carefully softly moved the goalpost and sophisticatedly broadened the scope of the geopolitical game by investing in fintech, infrastructure, gaming, social media, allowing them to understand a much broader scope of the community, building that database, and therefore strengthening their geopolitical levers. This means that we need to think about diplomacy potentially in a different way, and add different types of stakeholders, potentially the corporates that I've mentioned and others that have should potentially have a seat at the table. The question that you ask yourself is, what does that mean for nation states? Do they become less relevant? What happens when powerful stakeholders feel that they're becoming less relevant? They put themselves in the driver's seat. So I think we're going to see a tug of war between corporates and nation states as well in this geopolitical game. I want to mention consciousness. I want to mention it because it's an important fundament in the liberal world that we've discussed today, that changes some features of our liberal world. The historian and author Yuval Hariri writes a lot about it in his books and articles. He says, free will was always a myth. In previous centuries, it was a helpful one. Humans have will, but is it necessarily free? You cannot decide your desires. Are you an introvert? Are you an extrovert? Are you easygoing, anxious? Are you gay? Are you straight? You can't control even the next thought that pops up in your head. So humans make choices, but they're not independent. It's biological, social, personal conditions, and therefore you are susceptible to external pushings. So the belief of the free will now becomes dangerous in the digitalized world. If governments and corporates succeed in hacking the human animal, the easiest people to manipulate will be those who think that they have a free will. And what do you need to successfully hack humans? You need a good understanding of biology and computing power. That means soon corporates and governments that have both can hack you, predict your choices, re-engineer your feelings, and they don't need to know you perfectly. They just need to know you a little better than you know yourself, which isn't impossible because most people don't know themselves that well. So I think it's worth thinking about this conceptually. And that means the next generation of propaganda. And I don't have time to dive into all of that, but I think you know what I'm talking about. Every type of outer information, be it Netflix, be it CNN, be it Fox News, be it your filter bubble. You can't talk about technology and geopolitics without mentioning what's powering the power, which is mining. So follow both the supply chains and the understanding of mining, the needs for it to underpin the technology that we're building, to understand how the geopolitical shift is moving. We need to talk about dual use. We mentioned it previously, and the legislation is now moving forward, which means what was previously completely civilian now has both civilian and military uses, and therefore becomes more important and prioritized from a security point of view. And the Americans have just put the Restrict Act, Bill S686, on the floor, which effectively is a ban on TikTok if you look at popular media, but is a much broader scope of how we will understand technology made from foreign entities and the government's opportunity to use those to understand your behavior. We talked about deepfake. The landscape is moving forward, and as our former president was mentioning, legislation will be a key topic here when it comes to understanding everything from within this field, and deepfake being one of them. I think the rule of thumb is legislation will always be behind where technology is. Therefore, you need to optimize for outcome as opposed to specific technologies, because if you go after specific technologies, you'll always be late in the game. The interesting conversation about the ban of TikTok is worth following, and there's a counter narrative which I think plays into this, the shift in the geopolitical game, which is how much has Facebook invested via their PR agents Target Victory to scare US of TikTok? Like, what are the corporate interests in this? And are you escaping one big brother for another? I'm not going to give you any answers. I'm just saying there's a counter narrative to every big debate out there. I want to briefly go to the traditional battlefield and look at what we call some sort of a new OODA, Observe, Orient, Decide, Act, OODA. Within the geopolitical landscape, lethal autonomous weapon systems are an important thing to follow. The UN is looking at different ways of preventing autonomous weapon systems where AI on its own can identify, target, and take out enemies. And what would that look like? Where warfare is seconds and the human decision-making is taken out because it's slow. But the fact that it is slow allows us to have doubts, moral compass as part of a decision-making process. The war in Ukraine has very much been powered by tech, and it's worth looking at apps like Dia, where the population has been empowered to share images and understanding, helping a collective decision-making process. And the Ministry for Digital Transformation of Ukraine has been very innovative and entrepreneurial, but also bringing in the US players like Starlink, allowing them to get access. We've no social recognition. I think it's worth looking at that your heartbeat is individual, which means that I, from a satellite, can identify you based on your heartbeat. And if I'm allowed to use automated water weapon systems, I can take you out. Drones, biblical understanding and of what you can do with small drones. And just one little drone, there's an image there, can be targeted at you based on your Facebook profile and the image that you have on Facebook, and hit you, detonating a small bomb, taking you out. As I said, quantum computing will completely change the game, and our computers today will look like toasters and electrical toothbrushes when we understand how to power with quantum computing. I don't have time to go into the details, but I think you all know that this is worth checking. I will end with a conversation about net zero and geopolitics. And this is the basic gist of my book. We're looking at a green arms race. We are moving to a fossil-free economy. We have the Paris Agreement, and we know where we need to be within 2030, 45, and 50. Our whole infrastructure is being replaced. Infrastructure, products, policy, energy, everything. And the companies or nations that own that new infrastructure in the new era that is coming will be the geopolitical winner. And we are seeing that with Biden's IRA now, stepping up the game in order to win the geopolitical game. I want to highlight a few potential geopolitical threats, which could be called eco-wars. If we see tipping points like the Amazons or the tundra in Russia, being no longer carbon sinks, but racing the planet towards increased global warming, do we feel that those nation states own the Amazon? Is Brazil in charge of the Amazon, or are they custodians of the global lung? And if they are threatened, will we potentially see a military intervention to save the global lungs, like the Amazon? I think it's worth thinking about in the years to come. My prediction when it comes to artificial intelligence shifting the geopolitical game is follow the money. Understand how the big pension funds, how the big banks, how Silicon Valley VCs are investing, Vision Fund, etc., in order for you to be able to see, because they many times are the kingmaker. I have some suggestions for you to read, but basically it's a great time to build technology. The geopolitical game is shifting thanks to technology without bloodshed. It has been an honor.